Greetings, friends. I am Vitaliy Portnikov. The President of the Republic of Moldova, Maia Sandu, was recognized as the winner of the ranking of World Leaders of the Year, according to the authoritative British editions of the Telegraph. In this ranking, Maia Sandu was ahead of even such famous politicians as Italian Prime Minister Giorgio Meloni and Argentine President Javier Milei, politicians whose mentions appear in the world media almost daily, and the actions of which largely determine the politics of both Europe and Latin America. How is the winner of the rating was the president of a small country, which is trying by all means to leave the post-Soviet space and become part of the European Commonwealth of Nations. Journalists call Maia Sandu a leader whom Vladimir Putin failed to break. This is perhaps the most accurate assessment of what has been happening in the Republic of Moldova in recent years. It is worth recalling that when Maia Sandu became Prime Minister of Moldova, and this happened after the collapse of the oligarchic decision, Vlad Plahotniuc, Moscow has done everything possible to marginalize its power and turn the country's pro-Russian President Igor Dodon into the sole head of state. Nevertheless, Sandu managed not only to win the elections from Dodon, but also to be re-elected for a second term, for the first time in the country's history during the national elections. And this was, perhaps, the most obvious assessment of its activities by citizens. The Republic of Moldova and the obvious political defeat of Russia, which invested a lot of resources and efforts in these elections, trying to help the revenge of pro-Russian candidates. However, the main rematch was still ahead in 2025. After all, the powers of the President of the Republic of Moldova are incomparable with the possibilities that the Prime Minister of the country, who is elected to this position after the parliamentary elections, has. And it was the parliamentary elections that became the point of application for the Kremlin. As you know, even the curator of the Moldovan direction was changed. Long-term Kremlin curator of Moldova, the former deputy head of the presidential administration of Russia, Dmitry Kozak, who has already tried several times to turn Moldova into a satellite of Putin, had to give up his powers to a much more aggressive and tough. To the Kremlin official, the first deputy head of the presidential administration, Russian President Sergei Kiriyenko, who had previously actually forced the population of Abkhazia to vote for a candidate convenient for the Russian political leadership. And this is after months of protests in Abkhazia against Moscow's attempts to actually appropriate the coast of this self-proclaimed republic in favor of criminal Moscow clans. However, Kiriyenko suffered a defeat in Moldova, which can be compared with the previous fiasco, Kozak, and the majority of the country's residents supported the pro-European forces. And thus the most important attempt for Putin and his entourage to turn the Republic of Moldova into another failed. Another outpost of instability in the region and the center of the offensive against Ukraine. After all, one of the important tasks of Russian foreign policy, after the outbreak of the Great War with Ukraine, is the encirclement of this country. A chain of hostile regimes ready to cooperate with the Kremlin, let's say, on sensitive issues. And Moldova is one of those countries that Putin would like to see in the orbit of a pro-Russian offensive. On democracy and sovereignty of the former Soviet republics. The fact that Maia Sandu's persistence, I would say her rigidity during the election campaign, allowed her to defend national interests in a difficult confrontation. with supporters of the Kremlin and with its paid agents, some of whom, simply put, are trying to destabilize the Republic of Moldova from their Moscow apartments. This, of course, a great achievement, especially when compared dimensions of the Republic of Moldova and the Russian Federation. Especially if you remember about those billions of dollars that have been spent by the Russian intelligence services and their political agents in Moldova to destabilize the situation in the country, and the victory of the prophecy. Russian anti-Moldovan political forces, which, in general, did not hide their goals this time. After the parliamentary elections, it became clear that Chisinau is ready to make extraordinary efforts to stabilize the situation in the Gigi, another region turned by Moscow into a center of instability and criminal clans. A region that is used to promote the Moscow agenda and not at all to protect the rights of the Gagos people. As it should be from the point of view of the existence of autonomous Gagauzia within the Republic of Moldova. There are also real opportunities for integration in the future of the Transnistrian region, which is becoming more and more. It ceases to depend on Moscow's support and is increasingly becoming a region dependent on its relations with the European Union and on its integration in the Moldovan legal and the economic field. And thus, Maia Sandu has real opportunities, at least, to create conditions that will help eliminate this pro-Moscow separatist hotbed created to destabilize the situation. In Moldova, back in the days of the first and last president of the Soviet Union Mikhail Gorbachev, who tried to use such disadvantaged regions to preserve the so-called 16th Republic of the Union Center, who carried out real leadership. A country since the Bolshevik coup and the creation of the scenery of Russian chauvinism in the form of the Soviet Union. The fact that the president of a small European country is perceived as one of its main leaders wins the ranking of world leaders in 2025. This is a recognition that Russia can and should be fought on the political field, and that no amount of money that Moscow invests in the destabilization and decomposition of the post-Soviet space is worth the desire of people to live in a normal world and not in that miserable and monstrous one. Lipizzor, which was built in the Russian Federation, with the support of a large number of its chauvinistic population, Vladimir Putin. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel. Subscribe to it, subscribe to my social networks, to the channels in Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee and Donatella, which help to develop all the resources. Use of sponsorship on YouTube itself. Happy New Year 2026 and wish you a happy and successful year. Peace be upon you.